in back. So man David well activated blogger. Alaikum salam. Abdul Kabir. In back. Barakabake for your time. Thanks for tuning in. I guess we'll just get started. So I didn't have an appointment with anybody. Okay, last week I gave a trial run on my page, which doesn't get much traffic because I've not been using it a lot except to repost stuff. So I suggest to come back on here, and my connection is showing it's not bad. I might switch over from Wi-Fi because Bantafonyo Sambo already. So anyway, thanks for your time, guys. Allah barakabake. Just gonna dive into some issues to discuss. May I go a little bit more sulaka. Gambia la diamo buka bang so. Okay. So basically, alaikum salam Marabi inimba. Kaintel na problem ol momenting ke misdiagnose le. Wala mbukam bulo lo kuol ka me yalan ko wala sula nyanta men kachal ko ko naranta la ma fang la dro nka ambulungo ke fennati me yalan ko anin amumenti wal mankele ni nyanta dal burbal la ngata mara ni nyanta mara la ngata burbal ni nyanta tulo tema la ngam fay burbal wala mara nga janja so mu nek na la ba mul ka tar wur la ñokan ne modin mul la moy la mo moya fil ko ndabe sulo men ka wala sila tele ni ngot ni oje kacha hono drong moli yela emotional ye wala tammin. So whenever emotions are involved in anything, everybody feels like they are right because your emotions are valid. That's what you feel, that's what you want to rely on. So wala nantala kacha bukatamo dollar. But misalo tala yung kujamal men baby caring from the past month or 2 months or so. Nye jelebe ikal laban nyadil molki kaja nyadile cool nyin kana laban nyadile ngamen hameje fon ka soto je fon buka soto yiwa. So lafta men kaja la jama wala kala nyin confusion of membe kering now the Facebook follow kam mo jama bije ya jele army put out or Gambia Armed Forces put out a press statement basically debunking the claims that there is tribalism in the army. So, until a position momenti, wherever there are rumors, maybe the people spreading the rumor will exaggerate a bit. Maybe they will add stuff on there. Maybe they will misinterpret the facts that they have or whatever. But wherever there's rumors, let us be suspicious. What they are claiming is there. It may not be to the extent Komitel Kafanyame, but whatever they are suspicious of is actually there. And when any information of an release, we know their track record code. They don't just publish anything. They always put their finger on something that is going on. So, all that aside, perception is reality. Nimol member army, wali ya feel ko, the learning institution of the member and tribalism lam. Wala mwita la jernyat. So, niwa mo kilim fula sabay nani da mal kachata nyote ma yaje ko ha karden jikita la naka mem foto nyalam. Member caring and tribalism lam. Well, it doesn't bode well for anybody. Wala kata 1994 me do na wakono wo problem wala ya jame samana molka. So army capital fitna la press statement. I'm not gonna go through that, but ni read inya ka jele ikam fa to le wasaf kumo siata jam fata kumo buka kumo kunna fenyo banyor basically say ko molka men ha o manke to nyaat but ni aja be fola ko meta dairin na momam kuma mo basane kaf ni aje ba fola etel yo wala je ko wala be kere foto nya ba ko kono la bang photo nyata ku kono ba italla jernyam world andu nini molbe deal kan nyola men yalon ko wala jernya can have an impact on what you're doing wala nyantala yesi yela moy wala ikamam. So men can kumol publish based on their investigations coming after meng menga ben swara lo na bukana agenda na kuma kensam fola jando. Whatever he publishes or whatever he writes about, he has some information about that, basically, some facts. So he's not just going to publish anything. The expectation is that the army officials will come out and debunk or deny any of those claims being true. We expect that. But in the real sense, if people perceive there is something going on that doesn't favor them, they are going to act on that. And how do they act? They try to see people who have like minds and talk to them, this is what I think is going on. Because if you look at A, B, C, and D, it adds up to this. And that person will say, yeah, tonyal. And that person will say, hey, karinyol, you know, I know for yandu, tefanga miroko, tonyal, kuolga kurukuru wala nya. But ntalma France kama ntala, you even call me France kama kariya mele sama funyol be jane manfo. So itinya, alevo. Eh, Adama famo kare nimbar. Kaya nimbar. So essentially, nyin tribalism kumo menkafo. Yang Gambia, membeje, we cannot say it's not tribalism. But not in the sense that we have to understand tribalism. For example, in the Niko racism, model BJ, I feel the culture, being white people, is superior to the culture of people who are not white. You know, they go all out. Kajiko, mo fingo kana ke fentija. Wo sifal biye. Gambia o man soteje. Membiye, 12 of them cronyism and nepotism. But never caring, it has the impression of tribalism because Gambia is a multicultural country based on the fact that we have different cultures, Mandinkas, Jolas, Ropulas, Cereals, Wolof, Fullers. It's a multicultural country. So if you favor your relatives, most likely 99% of the chance that relative that you favor over everybody else is going to be from the same culture, same ethnic group as you. So it will give the impression there's tribalism going on there. Ika Mandinko leke fendija, ika Suwa leke fendi, or leke Fulo leke fendija, ika all the malafasa. That is the impression that's going to happen. Why? Because Ninsira, the mal Hanijan, Ikajala, Chinatown. Chinese also the Yajo Janga and favor like a business or Kenojana, but in those someone away in Catalogy. Before you know it, you have Chinatown, where the 99% or 98% of the population is all of Chinese origin. That doesn't mean they don't want to live anywhere else in society, but people feel more comfortable around their own people. So when you have ties like that, and you start favoring each other, it's going to look a little bit racist on the surface of it, when actually that is not your intention. So in the same way, Nico Kerpata Nyol Siva, Fulo Lesiaraje. You know? So we are bad in Samana Wasiraje. Wofana Adoko Samana Wena Sije. Wofana Barimusu Samana and Asije. Before you know it, you have a whole village. So Nico, the Lasate, Benjina Kalaja, is our Fulo Tenant in the Atra. That's just human nature. People are comfortable around their own culture, around their own kind of people. So it's in the same vein, Nita feel okay, government palazzo there's an opportunity here. Who do I know? Because in Gambia is not what you know, it's who you know. So who do I know? It's likely going to be somebody that you are close to. And that somebody you're close to, they marry within their culture or they live within a community that is predominantly the same culture. So if you favor people because you know them, based on that proximity, 99% of the time, it's most likely that they are from the same ethnic group as you because of how human nature is. So when that persists, it inevitably has the impression tribalism is going on. So people will have those things in common, regardless of what culture you are a part of. So when that happens, people have this impression there is tribalism going on. So nepotism essentially is tribalism, if you look at it, because you're favoring people that you know, and those people are likely from the same ethnic group as you, thereby sidelining others. There are corruption. People think about it in financial terms, but all this is corruption. All of this is corruption, where you don't give merit to people who deserve merit. Ninga TRRC Jube. In 1994, that was the sentiment. If you look at the top brass of the Gambia Army, the Gendarmerie, and the police, the top brass of them all of them, are either from Banjul or related to people from Banjul. Why? Because it's that connection. It's not what you know, it's who you know. They give those opportunities to you and promote you, and by the end of it, what happens? Tribalism is going on. Don't take it from me. Go back to the TRRC archives on GRTS or QTV or wherever, Yajube. What you're going to see is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Defense, at the time, he said there was an element of tribalism in there because people from the Combos, people from the rural areas feel like people from Banjul and the Combos were being favored. Those are his exact words. And that is the truth. Because it's an opportunity, before you know it, you have, the chief of police, the deputy chief of police, the head of police command, all of them from the same region, close to each other, and definitely from the same ethnic group. Even though they don't feel like, okay, we are better than these other people, we need to take all the positions away from them. But because you favor people you know, inevitably, what it leads to, drip by drip, is people from the same ethnic group getting all the favors and opportunities because they're connected to somebody, or they know somebody who, knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And everybody else starts looking at it like tribalism is going on here. Because politicians also give, voice to that. So there's no merit base. To know tribalism is not something that is in our forethought, like Muka Mira, Nimbena Kualkela. Nkajaloko is the consequence. 1994 coup d'etat. That sentiment was already there. Santonko le favor. The opportunity they bypass them and give it to people. Many alonko they are connected to people in power or in authority. And by that I mean, like permanent secretaries, ministers, political bigwigs. So, the officer corps almost entirely was people from the Combo St. Mary's area, because Ningo Combo Santo Fanambijela, and those people felt like they were excluded. So, based on that, people like Sana Sabalinyul, Yaya Jamenyul, even before that, Kukoi, the same thing. These are rural people who voted for the PPP and they are the most destitute in the country. We have to change it. That's why they took up arms. It's all in that fight for the rural people because they get left out. In government, we all agree. It's corruption, it's nepotism, it's cronyism. We all agree. If that is happening, then the few that are in power are going to benefit. And when they benefit, it looks like a certain segment of society is benefiting because they are all connected to each other. When it favors the other side, that's where you hear terms like terikafo during the PPP days. Terikafo, like they benefit from each other. That has a certain connotation to it. So when these impressions are there, people like Yaya Jamenyul, everybody knows 1994 coup d'etat mastermind was Sana Sabal, a Fula. Basiru Baronyol were all involved. Mandinkol Lawal. Edward Singaronyol Mandinkol. Yaya Jammeh. But when they decided that they are going to launch a coup, they agreed among themselves, coup d'etat. When they succeeded and they sat among themselves, there was no consideration. No. Based on their experience, if you promote based on merits, if you give opportunities based on merit, people recognize that among themselves. This is simply the calculation. Those people work with Yaya Jammeh and they knew when the promotions came, even though he might be lieutenant like the rest of them, but he got commission first, they gave him that respect. Yeah, Palazzo Dia. You be the chairman, you be the leader. The thinking Karamujolati was not even going to cross their mind. But then people get in power and they start changing because they want to keep that power. So they start using any tool they can use to make sure they maintain that power. That's when Yaya Jammeh drifted off into that, Mandinka, Namonim, Mandinka, Doyaning, all that kind of stuff. He was not doing it in the name of Jolas or in favor of Jolas. He was doing it because he wants to stay in power. What brought him to power? Nepotism. People getting favored over others despite the fact that they don't have any merit. What exacerbated it in Fakarita, Liberia, They left their battalions and ran away when the heat came on because they have no experience. Then those the whole contingent could have been dead from Charles Taylor's forces. So whenever there's nepotism or cronyism, these issues will come up. So the army say, oh yeah, there's no tribalism, there's no this, there's no that. They can deny it all they want. But as soon as that impression is planted, that suspicion, that doubt is planted in the mind of one or two of those officers, and they start talking about it among themselves, within people that they trust, it foments discontentment within the army. And that is the last thing we want in that country. Security sector reform needed because we have people in the army that were completely outside of the chain of command doing the jungle stuff. Security sector reform wanted to make sure there was a complete delineation between the police, the army, the paramilitary, or PIU. Completely, their roles will be clarified. Everybody will be subject to the command authority. Part of the security sector reform was that. So now they realize the army is always a potential threat. It's not always political threat in Africa. Nico politics, then they can concentrate. Joe Biden is not going to worry about the army launching a coup against him. It never even crosses his mind. If anything, they worry about a civil war more than they worry about the army toppling them because the army is professional. I can say a similar thing for Senegal too. Even during this last few months of Macky Sall's administration, people were worried there could be a coup because that's the norm in Africa. Oh, this is the only country that doesn't have a coup, and now Macky wants to tamper with their constitution. Maybe there will be a coup. So they realize they cannot leave the army alone, and because there's a lot of mistrust or distrust for the army within the Barrow's inner circle, now they want to position people in put people in positions of influence within the army so that they feel a little more secure. So while you're doing that, you are not familiar with the army chain of command, you are not familiar with the army rules of operation, you are not familiar with how promotions are done, how assignments are given based on seniority or whatever. You just care about who can I trust and who can I give position to. So you do that, and what ends up happening? People feel like they've been sidelined. And again, it goes back to the same thing. Oh, you got sidelined because look at the guy they promoted. He's related to this other person and they're from the same tribe. We're always going to see it that way. That's our reality. Fact, fiction, conjecture, it doesn't matter. That's the reality of our society. We are a multicultural society. We're going to see things one way or the other through a tribal lens, even if that is not the intention behind it. But like I said, we live in communities where they are close-knit. We all have family connections, but most of that connection is within the same ethnic group because that's human nature. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. When I come here, who was it? Adam Barrow, exactly. I don't know why I'm quoting him, but I'll quote him. When he met with President Faye, he was saying, even if you're in New York or somewhere in Europe and you hear somebody speaking Wolof, Sisasi, you feel connected to them. Why? Because this is somebody that's familiar. This is somebody familiar with my culture, somebody who knows where I come from, somebody who will not be fearful of me or suspicious of me because we share a similar culture, we share similar values, we share a similar outlook on the world, so he will not feel a threat to me. I'll feel comfortable towards them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The problem comes when politicians use it as a tool to stay in power. That's where it surfaces. So like I said, Yahya Jammeh, when he was coming to power, nobody gave consideration to the fact that he was a Jola. Sana Sabally was a Fuller. He was the complete mastermind of the coup, assisted by Edward Singate and Mandinka, and Basiru Barrow and all the others were key players in that coup. But they realized that Jammeh was senior in terms of who got commissioned first. They gave him the role. There was no talk of tribalism. Nobody cared about stuff like that. But when he got into power and he feels like he needed to stay in power, there was going to be threats coming from all angles. So to eliminate those threats, he's going to look for people he trusts. And those people are people from his, ethnicity, people from his region, and put them in key positions, and everybody else feels sidelined and alienated. And because they feel that way, they wanted to do something about it. So every time there is a threat to his power in, terms of kula keta jang, kudeta jang, kudeta jang, they start saying, okay, mandinkolle malafia jamal masaya, mandinkolle fengkara. Why? Because you started it. You didn't trust them, so you bypassed them and brought people to help you stay in power, to make you feel secure. And while you're doing that, you sideline these other people. And because they deserve it, in the sense though they have been in the army longer, they have been to combat zones where they have experience, that warrants that when the promotion comes, they get promoted. But you sideline them because you don't trust them. And now they are discontent and they want to get rid of that system. And then you target to tribe when you're the one who introduced the whole tribe thing. It's a cycle. It doesn't stop. Once you start drawing the circle, you're going to go around and round and round. One thing feeds the other thing, and it goes on. So the same thing. Since 2016, the talk of, oh, they're trying to sideline the Jolas because, you know, everybody knows Yahya Jammeh used the army as a tool and he favored people from his ethnicity. So in order to address that, it has to be a delicate balance, which is why people like Baji, former CDS, I think, featured prominently in this security sector reform to see that this is not a target against a specific ethnic group, but Jammeh promoted people who didn't deserve to be promoted. The only consideration was they are from my region, they are from my tribe. I'm going to put them in position so I can feel safe. So to reform the army, it requires tact. And that includes making sure you do not victimize new people in order to make other people feel safe. But they completely disregarded that. And now, because the army is constantly 100% threat to power in Africa, they are trying to position themselves in a way so that any potential threat that is going to come from anywhere can be neutralized before it becomes a major threat to their power. That is what they are doing. And in that consideration, Sidinja has no, because his name featured, that's why I'm naming him. He has no experience in security. He has completely no knowledge of how any of these things work. But his name featured in that. He should have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with what is going on in the army. But his name featured. And like I said, wherever there's a rumor, there's some element of truth to it. We should not completely brush it aside. Oh, this is just some discontent people. It doesn't bode well for anybody. It only took 5 people, in fact, 2 people. I can say Sana Sabali, Yahya Jammeh, Basiru Barrow, Edward Singare, those people to overthrow a 30-year regime. You just have to have enough people to feel the same way that they are feeling for this not to go well for anybody in the country, because there can only be one bloodless coup. I'm not saying there's going to be a coup in the Gambia, but people need to be careful how they treat issues, especially around these kinds of things when it comes to promotions. So, the Lamol, they don't know how to talk to each other. We cannot talk over each other. We cannot debate issues without relating them to one thing or the other, which brings me to my next point. Hamad Ba. So in his speech to religious leaders, which Mr. Dabo also touched on yesterday, talking about, you know, having to give license to people before they can preach. That happens in other countries, fine. But what that does is, from the get-go, 100% attack on speech. He wants to police the speech of imams on their pulpits. Simple. Why do I say that? Because in the Gambia, there are laws against incitement. It is not our problem if you're not going to enforce them because somebody is an imam. It's not our problem if you're not going to enforce it because somebody has a large following. That's you being fearful of an individual. But there are laws against incitement. Somebody incites, there are laws to prosecute that. Go for that law. Do not go out and say we're going to create a scenario where every religious leader, because once you say they need a license, it encompasses everybody. Whether they are moderate, extreme, it doesn't matter. Everybody needs a license. That's policing speech. That's against our constitution. That's the fundamental basis. Don't go about arguing, oh, Gambia is a secular state, Gambia is a this, Gambia, it doesn't matter. As soon as you start saying we're going to put regulations on what imams can say, you're policing speech, and that's against the constitution. That should be the debate we're having. It's as simple as that. Should there be any provisions for that? No, but then some imams are saying some things. If they say something wrong, there's always a remedy in the law. Incitement to violence. Prosecute them. Put them in jail if you have to. They are not above the law. They are not so special that they are not, you know, above human follies. Yeah, Jammeh did it in the past, even though he did it extrajudicially. So, you know, problem what? Al mamol kamen for man left wall. There was this imam whose video went viral. Why? That's the reality. People see it. Everybody is living in abject poverty. You know, there are so many imams, they are not keeping quiet. But because it disturbs the conscience when you hear the truth and it applies to you especially, you don't want to hear it. That is what these people are doing. It's all a move to preserving their power and not having a challenge. That's all it is. So instead of Gambians going out, you know, more debate, like Gambia is a secular state. Gambia is not an Islamic state. Even though we have many Muslims, somebody wrote a post on Open Gambia that I was reading, is Islamic tradition, Kafoko. If you live in a state where you cannot practice your religion, you migrate. That is the dumbest argument anybody can ever have. And then they went ahead and gave the example, Kafoko, in Makkah, when the Quraysh were not allowing the Muslims to practice their religion, it was ordained on the Prophet to migrate. That's how he ended up in Medina. Like, using that simple, you know, minded argument, let us flip it on its head. When Islam came, the Quraysh were already living a certain kind of lifestyle. For example, in America, they have a certain way of life. Islam is alien to this land. So if we suddenly come, and then they see Islam as a threat, they're obviously going to attack it, which they do. It's the same thing. Quraysh were living a certain kind of lifestyle. They have a way of life, you know, everything that they get their economics from was threatened by Islam. So it was in their interest to say that we don't want this religion to grow in our environment. So they started negotiating with them to make them deviate. They started doing all kinds of things. When that failed, they started being violent against them, persecution. That was when the Muslims migrated. But the caveat here is that Islam came and found a way of life it was seeking to change. So let us revert that to the Gambia and argue it. When the Gambia became a country or a state or a nation in 1965, let's say, for example, was there Muslims in the country at that time or not? There was. So if you want them to change their lifestyle to adopt a new system, which is this secular state thing, then I think the secularists are the ones who should migrate because they found the Muslims there, living their way of life. I'm just saying this is a simple argument using his own logic. The newcomer is the one who should go because they are coming into an environment where their way of life is not welcome. You don't tell people to migrate 98% of the country to some stupid place just because they want to practice their religion and then 5% is not allowing them to practice their religion. Why does that make sense anywhere in the world? That's why I'm saying we always misdiagnose the problem. 100% of the time, almost. What is the issue? People are feeling like, and I'm not just going to tie it to that debate about imams during Eid, talking about government corruption and ministers and, you know, all that. It all ties down to the events preceding that moment, which is the whole female circumcision thing. That's what I choose to call it. That's what I'm going to call it. That whole debate, the most vocal imam on that topic was Imam Fatih, saying that even if you make it law, we're not going to respect it. And then everybody is like, oh, you know, the Gambia is not an Islamic state. Nobody is arguing that it's not an Islamic state. They're just saying that we're going to practice our religion the way we see fit. You can make your laws all you want. We're not going to obey them. We'll practice our religion. And if you persecute us for it, then, you know, we will resist. That's all he's saying. So why don't we just listen and figure out a way in addressing that issue? Listen, figure out a way where you're going to have to walk the middle path. You don't force people one way or the other when they tell you that they're going to resist. Because they've already couched it in that religious debate. And if you're not careful, that's what you're going to incite in society. That these people are after us because of what we believe. Granted, every segment of Muslims, they don't agree on everything 100%. We all agree that we should pray 5 times a day. We should fast during Ramadan, that Muhammad is a prophet, that there is only one God, and that we can go to Mecca if we can afford it. Everybody agrees on that. Nobody's going to debate that. But some will say when you're praying, you should do this. Some will say, no, you should put your hands down. There is no single source when it comes to Islam. So many things are subject to interpretation. So if some people feel they are going to interpret the religion one way, and because of your perception or your views on religion, you're now going to police every other imam based on that single individual, you are policing speech. It is against our constitution, number one. And number two, it is persecution, because those people didn't do anything wrong. Number three, there is a law on the books called a law against incitement to violence. So you can use that approach to prosecute people who you feel are threatening the peace of the country based on inciting other people to act a certain way that is contrary to the laws. It's that simple, but they're not going to do that. It's always a bigger goal for them, and that goal is suppressed dissent. And what they fail to realize is that the Gambia has moved past that. People are going to speak. You may not like what they say, but they're going to speak. If you feel like what they said is injurious to the state or to an individual, libel, there is laws against that. Defamation. But we never focus on that issue. As soon as people speak, we say, oh, Gambia is not an Islamic country. So does that mean that Muslims cannot practice their religion in that country? It's the same thing when it came to the secular. Jawara was the most progressive president the Gambia ever had, even though we're only going to compare him to two people. One was an extremist, the other was an idiot. He was the most progressive president. This issue has been there during his time. What did he choose to do? Go about it, educating people away from the practice rather than legislating against it. And that worked for a time. But we are people that are impatient. We want remedies now, now, now. But on the other side too, I'm not for, I'm not against, I'm not anything. I'm just giving you a rational way to think about this issue. In 2015, when they brought this law saying that this practice is banned in the country, only 2 people from Kiang have been taken to court regarding the issue. They ended up dropping the charges because there was not enough evidence against them. Does that mean that from 2015 to now, the practice has not been taking place in the Gambia? Of course it has. Senegal banned it way, way, way before Gambia. Casamance is the capital of the practice. So who are you protecting by using the laws? Laws look nice on the books. They are there. But what point are the laws about when they don't remedy the situation you're seeking to, or you cannot enforce them, or you choose not to enforce them just because they are there? Like Dr. Caesar said, oh, those laws are on the books, but Barrow doesn't plan to use them. Like, you're talking to idiots or small kids. If he doesn't plan on using them, let him get rid of them. But Gambian until wolum na problem, you know, and then we start injecting our emotions into it. So everybody feels that they are right, because what I'm feeling is what I'm feeling. You cannot deny that. You don't know what I'm feeling. So I'm right in what I'm feeling. So why don't we just put the feelings aside and talk about the real issue that is going on in the country? And that is the fact that corruption is going to be the ruin of all of us. Few people might look like they're enjoying, but it's only going to be for a time. And when the stuff hits the fan, everybody's going to get stained. So what is wrong with speaking against it? If imams use words to speak against you and saying this is what is going on, use words to counter it. You have the facts. They claim A, B, and C, but in fact it's D, E, and F. But when people are fearful of words, it means that there's something going on underneath. But in the many years of arguing or debating online, you realize that Gambians either exaggerate the issue, try to connect it to something completely unrelated to it, or frame it in their own frame of mind so that it fits the narrative that they want to portray. I'll give you one example. When we had the whole issue of 3 years Jotna, people started attacking us, oh, you are the guys who are against Dafadoy. And when you ask for evidence, they say, oh, here is your post. And the post they reference was, if you're going to demonstrate against NAWEC, number one, poor services and everything, everybody agrees. But once you started talking about you're going to demonstrate, you met the Islamic Council, Supreme Islamic Council, who I think through them facilitated you meeting the Vice President and the Cabinet. You know, I think at the time it was Fatma Diallo Tambajang who was the Vice President. And in fact posed with them. So my argument was, demonstrations, from what I understand, protests, from what I understand, is to bring attention to an issue. Whose attention are you trying to capture? People who are making the policies. So the people making the policies, you want to capture their attention. They invited you to a meeting at cabinet level, beyond the vice president, and the president is the most senior policy maker in the country. Well, in fact, they all answer to him. So if you met those people, then your purpose of protesting, maybe Yamarisindolam, but it's considered irrelevant or moot, because they already heard your side of the story. They invited you over and you're sitting down with them. So it's moot. There's no need for you to go on a protest anymore. So if I made that argument and then you say, oh, I'm against protests, then you're not getting the point. My point is, you want to send a message. The person you are trying to send the message to has already received the message, then why waste the money on postage? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So instead of that, say, oh, these people want to introduce dictatorship again. They don't want anybody to go against Barrow and all that, blah, blah, blah. And now, you know, hey, turn the script on them, going after the 3 years Jotna people. They deserve it. You are putting emotions into it. You are not looking at the real issue. Because number one, those people requested a permit. They were given a permit just to show the impression that we are a democratic country. And when they went out, they got attacked. It's simple. But once you bring emotion into it, or these were the people who were against this one kind of protest yesterday, today they are for protest, we're going to be against it because yesterday we were for it and today we are against it. It never goes anywhere. I don't do circular arguments, and that's always what we seem to be doing in the Gambia. Like, if it is A, then I'm going to be on B, and then if you go to B, I'm going to be on A. It's like playing tic-tac-toe. So nothing ever gets resolved. This whole issue about banning this practice of female circumcision, where did it go? One side rose up, it has to be, and then the other side rose up, and it cannot be. And then we're going to put it on hold. So now the state is coming out, and they're not doing it on our behalf. Let's be honest about it. They're doing it on behalf of the donors and people, just to say, we have it on the books, even though it's not going to be implemented, it's on the books. So where is the protection for the girl child that you're talking about? Why don't we then have a discussion about the issue? That's my question. The law is there. Let's say, for example, yeah, they allowed it. It's the law. It's on the books, just like it was in 2015. How many people went through the practice since 2015? And what was being done about it? Nothing. So essentially, it just looks good. I'm just going to build this edifice. It's standing there. But whether somebody occupies it or not, it doesn't matter. It's just going to be there. That's what you call a white elephant project. It benefits no one. So why don't you listen to that side and then come up with a better solution? It can be eradicated, which, you know, science points to. There could be harm in that practice. I say could be, because not all of it results to harm, like they say, depending on, you know, I don't want to get into details of that, but I'm using could be. So you can use that scientific evidence as your argument. The problem starts when you're saying this is un-Islamic. You're going to hear from the imams, it is not un-Islamic. And they have a point. They will bring their evidence and say this is why it is not un-Islamic. So essentially, Islam doesn't say you must do it, but it didn't say the opposite either. So it's your choice. If you want to do it, fine. If you didn't do it, it doesn't mean that your Islam is deficient. But it's not an injunction on you either. For example, going to perform the Hajj. If you can afford it, it is now an injunction upon you. And you will be at fault for not performing it. Because you can afford it health-wise, mentally, you know, physically, economically, you can afford it. Now it's an obligation on you. If you don't do it, then your Islam is deficient. Because you're deliberately choosing to ignore an obligation on you. But if you're poor, it's not an obligation on you. If you can come up with a way to go, then fine. So it's a similar thing. You are not a better Muslim because you did the practice. But you are no less of a Muslim because you didn't do the practice. It's a matter of choice. So why would you go to the extreme end of saying this is un-Islamic? When you do that, now you invite the imams. They will come in and tell you it's not. And now the debate is muddied. So leave that part out of it. It's a choice. If people want to do it, they can do it. If they don't want to do it, it doesn't make them any less Muslim. That's the understanding that we get from the scholars of Islam. That's their whole point. You cannot force anybody to go through it, but you cannot tell people that because you're doing it, you're violating the laws of Islam when you don't know the laws of Islam. That is their whole argument. So why don't you leave Islam out of it and talk to them about it from the health perspective? Maybe you will go somewhere. But having it on the books, so when we make those arguments, as soon as you start saying that, you say, oh, X is supporting the practice. Go ahead. You can say whatever you want to say. It doesn't change the fact. It's like now, when you're saying it's like killing babies is wrong, they say you are an anti-Semite. People don't care about that anymore because you're speaking what you feel like is the truth, and objective people will see it. So if we want to address an issue, let us focus on that issue. Absolutely on that issue. Talk on the merits of the issue and what we think are the disadvantages. Maybe we will go somewhere. You know, growing up, in my experience, one of the like Ami Bojan Siso and Dr. Eseture, when they had this Gamcock trap thing, like I was saying, Jawara was the most progressive. He allowed discussions on the topic, but educate people away from it was his approach rather than legislating against it. Because when you do that, two things are going to happen. Number one, people feel like you're forcing them to be less than they are supposed to be. Because the people practicing it feel like this is my culture. If I don't do this for my child, I'm depriving them of something that I should give them. You can say that's a stupid logic. That's a notion that is not sensible. That's how they see it. That's how they look at it. Nadino ma buy, and some of them will go to the extent of saying Nadino for my require, which is also, you know, something that needs to be addressed. But if they start feeling like, oh, the state is forcing me to not be a full human being by saying I cannot do this practice, then you have a problem. So what about educating them away from it? And when the program used to come, like they call it Musolta program on Radio Gambia, my mother would say, I'm not wasting my battery on that, shut it down. So the people you're talking to now are not going to hear you. How are you going to educate them? Because you came with a label to them that they don't appreciate. So we have a problem making progress on any issue because we force lead with emotions into a conversation, and emotion, that shuts down your intellect. As soon as emotion goes up, that's why we hear it from the Ustaz. It's never the Ustaz, but the Prophet used to say, "Ni kam fata si, ni beloren si." Just calm down before you make any decisions. When your emotions are involved, just calm down first. So us, we hear something and then and then we start talking about the issue and being all angry, and then before you know it, we start insulting each other or each other's parents. So anyway, I hope the army realizes goal. It only takes, like they say, one rotten potato to spoil the whole bag. It only takes one person to feel like we are being sidelined based on our, you know, ethnicity or the tribe we're from, and that is why X, Y, and Z are being promoted and we are not being promoted. It only takes one person to plant that seed. It's called the waswasa. To plant that seed into somebody else for that person to agree with them. Oh yeah, I think you are onto something. You know, we need to look at this more closely. And then they start doing their little digging and say, hey, I spoke to X also and he thinks, you know, so what do you think we should do about it? It's the next logical step. What do you think we should do about it? Because you've already won them to your side of the argument. So the best advice is go for the security sector reform, kick these idiots, politicians, out of your policy decisions in the army. It is not going to bode well for anybody. Not for you, not the politicians, not for the country. As soon as people start feeling that, it is not going to end well. So kick them out, base your decisions on merit. Somebody has been a commissioned officer for 5 years. If the law says that after 5 years, based on A, B, and C, if you test them and they make it, promote them, go ahead and do that. Don't worry about whether they are from this region or that region, or that they support this party or that party. And in fact, you cannot say that. You're just assuming that they do, but which is now a crime in the Gambia. If you're not openly loyal to the ruling party, then you are supporting the opposition, and that is not acceptable. So we're either going to fire you or deprive you of any opportunity that may be coming your way, and then we're going to sideline you in favor of somebody else. So what do you think that's going to do? People are going to pick up on it and say, yeah, this is what is happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, yeah, it is what is happening. So what do you think we should do about it? That's the next logical conclusion. What do you think we should do about it? And when that floodgate opens, nobody's going to be able to shut it down. Ask Yahya Jammeh about it. With all his power and stuff, how many coups or attempted coups or rumors of coups did he have to go through? Like I said, this is not wishing for it to happen in the Gambia, but when the rumors start, the next logical step is asking what should we do about it. And the army is 100% a threat to political power in Africa, in every African country. Those who have not experienced it, yes. But look around. So if that element is there, why are you toying with it? Why are you messing with it? Exactly. It should be apolitical. Like, that is an institution that fair treatment goes well for everybody. Somebody deserves to be promoted, promote them. Don't say this is my relative and I'm gonna bring them closer and give them this opportunity. No. Base it on seniority. Just like in some of our cultures. Oh, your sister didn't get married, so you should wait, which is wrong, of course, obviously. You should wait because that's a different matter. But if somebody is more senior than you and the promotion comes and it's based on seniority, let the senior person go a step. Make the second lieutenant a lieutenant, make the lieutenant a captain. When the next promotion comes, let the captain go to the major and the second lieutenant or the lieutenant who was second now goes to captain. Do it that way so everybody gets their turn. But as soon as you start saying, oh, I don't trust this person because he's related to A, B, and C, and that person is a big UDP supporter, so, we should be careful of this person. Oh, yeah, so we cannot promote him to this position. And then you bring somebody else. That person feels sidelined. Even if he was not thinking politically, now he's going to think about, why are they sidelining me? You planted a seed of doubt in that person. And as for Hamad Ba, that's the irony for me. National dialogue, peace and stability of the country, which is one word I hate. But everything you're doing, everything you're saying is recipe for blowing things up in the opposite direction. We want peace and stability, but you're feeling people who are mostly religious. And what people don't know is their religion means more to them than their nation state. Their ethnicity means more to them than their nation state. Because that cuts across nation states. If you're a Muslim in Gambia, you feel affinity to Muslims in Pakistan, in India. It doesn't matter. You see them, they come for their dawah and stay at Marcas. You feel a brotherly connection to them. So it doesn't matter if you're black or Gambian or whatever. It doesn't matter. You feel more connection to those people. If you are, Halpura, you feel connection to your kinfolk in Senegal, in Guinea, in Mali, in Mauritania, in Niger. Same thing, if you're Mandinka, you feel more connection to those people than being confined in, what Alaji would say, that colonial space. So dealing with some of these issues requires tactful strategy, so you don't alienate one group of people by favoring others. You give everybody their due. That's why we say rule of law. Once you follow this is not complicated, it's just basic math. Just follow the rule of the law and everybody should be okay. If they are not, they can have remedy in the law. But once you start showing favoritism because you want to preserve your political capital, that's what it's going to lead to. When Yahya Jammeh thought that his main threat was in the army, November 11 happened. And when he realized that it was not just the army, before that, he thought it was politicians. So everybody who was in PPP and was a minister, PPP basically was banned. Anybody who was ever a minister was banned. And in that system, there was a parliamentary system. We had a parliamentary democracy. Members of parliament were also ministers. So if you are a minister, that means you are a member of parliament up to a certain point. That means you cannot run for president. You cannot be vying for political office in the Gambia. That was the ban when Yahya Jammeh came to power. NCP, the same thing, because NCP was a defection from PPP. And Sirif Diba was the first vice president. Most of the people who supported him were also ministers in the PPP government. So NCP, PPP, GPP, they were all banned. So now he feels like I've caged all the old politicians. PDIS is the only one left, but, we can manage with them. Since there's not going to be any political activity, we're going to put a lid on all political activity. And when it resumes, people will be looking for a new home. Because PDIS was fairly new at that time. They came in 1985 and, they were not making much progress in terms of number of votes they get. So they didn't feel like that was a threat. So when he realized in 1996 that UDP became a political threat, so between 1994 and 96, he felt like, now that I have neutralized the politicians, the army is the next big threat. He went after the army. November 11 happened. And after that, the army was kind of subdued. 1996, UDP came out of nowhere, and he feels such a big political threat. He said, I'm going to release all the other ones who have been dormant, because UDP is essentially PPP, NCP, GPP together. So if I say they are no longer banned, all of these people will go to their various homes and their votes will be split, and then I'll have more power. That was his strategy. That was his thinking. So wherever there is a threat, they want to eliminate it. He bought GRTS, he built GRTS, he bought the Daily Observer so that he can control information. It's the same thing these people are trying to do. Let's position our favorite people in the army so that they can neutralize any attempts against us. And then let us give this 500, I don't know how many $1 million is to people to promote our government agenda. Government, spelled NPP. They can promote our agenda. And then what next? Let us try to see how best we can control the speech. Because it's easy to say, oh, this person is talking there, UDP. After you told people UDP is a tribalist party, blah, blah, blah. That will sell for a certain time. But now when people talk, oh, well, UDP call it. But when you see imams, and you know how much they are respected in the country, speaking against you, what do you start saying? Let's look for a license to ban these people. But we're not going to call it banning. We'll say we want responsible speech. And we're watching it unfold. Instead of us focusing on the fact that they're trying to police the speech of people, when they can use laws like incitement to violence to prosecute any imams, they're not going to use that. They're going to bring new laws so that any imam who wants to preach will go and get a license. And depending on where you're from or how they think of you, you're not going to get that. It's the same thing like the Public Order Act. Before you can demonstrate, the police have to give you the okay. So now before you can preach to your people, the police have to say you can do it or not. But instead of us talking about that, we're going to say, oh, the Gambia is not an Islamic state. The Gambia is not a Sharia state. The Gambia is not this. Complete deflection away from the topic. So I hope people listen. I hope they take note and try to remedy this situation before it gets out of hand, because that's where it's going. That doesn't bode well for anybody. So when people talk, listen. That's the first step. And you might be able to see where they're coming from. Then you can have a sound debate and move on to solutions together. Otherwise, everybody is in trouble. Allah barakabaka for next week, inshallah.